Welcome back to Knit a Spell, everyone. I am your host, Katie Rempe, and today I am joined by my friend and fellow magical maker, Sasha Ogden.
I'm so happy to be here.
She's a knitter, crocheter, spinner. You divine, you do it all, and own your own yarn store, skeinshop.com. Today, we're talking about a very exciting project, how she adapted these river mitts, maybe
Ooh.
you've heard of them, into an amazing hat. And we're going to talk about the magic of creating, problem solving, and the approach that she used to adapt this pattern into a brand new object. It's a mix of magic and fiber. I think you'll love it. So let's dive in.
Yeah.
Light from Lantern presents Knit a Spell. I'm your host, Katie Rempe, designer, knit witch, and your companion in this magical making podcast. Together, let's explore the enchanted world where knitting meets the magic of the craft. Okay, so first of all, we've talked about this before. You've knit the river mitts. What do you enjoy about that pattern in particular?
Oh my gosh, there's so much because it's such a good pattern. I love the simplicity of it. Like that, I think is really the heart of the river mitts is that they are so versatile, so wearable, and yet so simple to knit. It's just knits and purls. There's not a bunch of shaping. There's no thumb gusset. It's like just chill start to finish.
It's like a tube sock. No heels, no toes, no gusset, no problems. Just one little tiny technique that sets it apart from the rest. So what inspired you to then adapt it into a hat?
Okay, so when you were running your knit along, at first I was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna make another pair. I have a pair. I love them. They're great, but I like, do I need to?" And then I decided, yes, I need to for morale. But this year I'm really trying to focus on knitting down my stash, not because I think I have too much yarn or it's like stressing me out, but just because I have a lot of really beautiful yarns and I want to knit with them. So I'm trying to be really mindful of stopping there first and seeing if there's anything that I had, especially putting a focus on my handspun because I have so much handspun, especially from when I was first learning that I just I made it. I didn't have a project in mind. So I just put it in the stash and was like, "Oh, I'll figure it out later." So I pulled out some spindle spun yarn for the knit along that I was like, "Oh, this is frankly not really up to my standards anymore."
Mm.
But I think such a simple pattern will be really forgiving of like, oh, some parts are a little thicker, some parts are a little thinner. And when I was done, not only did I love working with those yarns, and I want to have a whole sidebar about how you should use your beginner yarns,
Yes.
but I loved the color combo. I was just like, I wasn't ready for the project to be over. And so I was like, oh, I still have yarn left. I might have enough for a hat. And wouldn't it be cool to have a matching set? And then I started thinking, I'm a knitter. Like, I knit a lot.
What?
And, like, I look forward to fall every year. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, the hand knits are coming out, getting my scarves, getting my hats." I don't have anything that matches. In fact, I
Mm.
hardly have stuff that, like, looks like it could go together because I just make whatever makes my heart happy, and my heart has a lot of things that it finds joy in. So I thought, I want a hat and hand warmers that match.
Whoa, okay. What is the sidebar, now that we're here,
Yeah,
about using your beginner yarns? You're talking about the beginner yarns from learning how to spin, right?
learning how to spin, yeah. So a lot of people, when they first start spinning, they go, "Oh, this is too lumpy to use, or it's too dense, or there's not enough yardage," or and I get all of that. I have been where you are. But there are two reasons to use your beginner yarns right now, as soon as you make them. And those are number one, you will improve so much faster when you know what your yarns are like, what you like about them, what you don't like about them. I know the minute that I started using my yarns, I was like, oh, I want more plying twist in this. And then I started putting more ply
Mm.
twist in my yarns because you have that control when you're hand spinning. So you're really holding yourself and your skills back by not using what you make. The other thing is that lumpy yarn that there's not very much yardage of, that you're like, oh, this is horrible, it actually probably looks way better knit up than you thought it would. I have been really, really surprised at how inconsistent yarn can still make a very cohesive looking finished product. I remember when I was starting this knit along for the River Mitts, I sent a picture of the yarn to Katie and I went, we're just going to be embracing the texture and embracing the unevenness, and you can't really tell. I think that that will also help you realize as a beginner spinner that, I mean, certainly strive to improve your skills, make exactly the yarn that you want to make, but it doesn't have to be perfect to make really wonderful things, to behave just as well or better than yarn you could buy in a store. And as a really fun experiment, I encourage all of you to go to your stash, find some commercial yarn that you love, cut off a yard and take it apart, like take the plies apart and look at them and just notice, like, how consistent are those singles really? Because
Oh, yeah. Not as
um,
consistent as you might think.
maybe not as consistent as you might think. And part of the way that you get more consistency, both as a commercial mill and as a hand spinner, this is just the nature of yarn, is the more plies, the more those uneven spots work themselves out, the more they distribute, and the thin spot ends up next to the thick spot. And then it's the same as everywhere else. Also, there's a physics thing about how yarns that are higher than 2 ply like spiral around kind of an invisible core, and the thickness can kind of take up some of that invisible
Ah,
space in the middle, which is why you see so many commercial yarns that are 3 plies and 4 plies and even far more plies than that. Once you really start taking them apart, you might find that, oh, I thought this was a 4 ply, but each of the plies is actually made up of 2 smaller plies.
yes. Great
And
point. Yeah.
all of that helps mask inconsistencies. So do a little
Ah.
science, do a little experimenting.
Ooh. Give yourself some grace. Again, like this idea of perfection that you have to be immediately good at the new craft that you're starting is absurd. Like, embrace the process. If you wanted it to look a certain way, you could just buy it already that
Yeah,
way. But, like, what's the fun in that, right? That's why we're choosing to make ourselves. Asked
absolutely.
for the version I knit, because we kind of shared this pattern, so that I was like, well, I need one. I also used stash yarn. Now, this was not hand spun yarn from me, but somebody spun it, right? I also used a yarn that had, it's a 1 ply and like a bit of a thick and thin that I didn't realize until I started casting it on. And I was like, what is up with this yarn? And just like you said, especially with the ribbing pattern, you really don't notice it. Overall, it
Mm.
just blends. It becomes the fill. Only you know. And, again, maybe that's part of the magic is that it wasn't perfect. But the people who are looking at your finished object are going to be like, "Oh my gosh, amazing.
Can't
I
believe
love
you
this."
made that. You're so skillful.
Right. And from what I understand of spinning, which is very little because I don't do it myself, even though I tried, just don't have the patience. It's more difficult over time to get that sort of like art yarn, thick and thin inconsistency because you train yourself to do better, more consistent, more to your taste level. So that could end up
Yeah,
being some of like your most unique stash in the end.
it does require a whole different level of skill to do thick and thin on purpose and really train your hands to be inconsistent in that way.
Now that we've had our little sidebar about using your stash, which use your stash, it's still
Use
good.
your
You bought it for a
stash.
reason. Like whether it's fiber or whatever, use it. Find a reason to use it. Were there any unexpected design challenges as you were transforming this pattern from mitts to hat?
Well, yes and no. I will say once I had the design in my mind, it came out pretty easily the way that I had envisioned it, but I spent maybe 3 days kind of just going with, "Oh, would I want it to be like this or like this or like this
Mm,
or like this?" 'Cause I had to really think about what was it that I loved about the River Mitts and how could I preserve those feelings, those aesthetics in a hat? Because part of what
mm,
I loved was the double cuff and the way that the second cuff kind of scrunches up and stands away from the first cuff. And that's hard because, like, on your hand, you have your thumb. Your thumb helps make that happen. On your head, you don't
Yeah.
have thumbs on your head.
You
Uh,
don't?
yeah, I mean, I don't. If you have thumbs on your head, it's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a great hat for you. I don't know. So I was thinking a lot about, like, how deep did I want the double cuff to be? What did I want the crown and the decreases to look like? And so, spoiler alert, I opted for what I consider kind of a more architectural look at the top. The decreases form just 4 lines. It's a square instead of I if I'm on autopilot when I make a hat, I do a spiral at the top.
Oh.
I thought that that really tied in well with the simplicity of, like, the arm of the river mitts just kind of being straight and smooth. I didn't want to introduce round shapes right at the end. I felt like that wasn't the mood. I will say I had in my head how I thought it would look when I wore it and how I would style it and, like, scrunch the brims around different ways. And when I put it on, it didn't really behave the way that I thought it would. I love it. I think it's really cute, but in my head, the outer brim was scrunchier, like could bunch up and look cute like slouchy socks, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
But in reality, when I tried to do that, it was like, would you like a weird ridge
Yeah.
in various chunks of your head? And so yeah, a little bit of adaptation in how to wear it, how to style it. But
Just goes to show you that even designers who have it fully thought out, like mull about it for quite a while, have done a similar sort of a thing, it still surprises us in the end. And that's not always a bad thing. Yeah.
no, no, it's not. There's something so magical, ooh, magical, about making something new. This hat has never existed before. So I'm getting to learn about it as I'm making it and going, "Oh, how does it act?" The more you knit, the better you get at making educated guesses and good predictions, but it doesn't mean that you get everything right the first try.
Do you want to show it off
I
now that
do
we've
want
been
to show it
chatting
off.
about it?
So I'm gonna start by putting on one of these river mitts so that you can see the vibes of the pair that made me go, "Okay, I need this on my head." So here are
Yes.
my river mitts, and the inner yarn, kinda stripes, kinda marls, it's random. It was made from I was carrying a line of fiber that had, like, a bunch of different colors, and they had sent me, like, a tiny tuft of every color, and then they stopped making it, so I had to stop carrying it. I was like, "What am I gonna do with all of these samples?" So I just spun them completely randomly, did not, like, pick like, just pulled one out of the bag, and that was the next one, which made for a really wild yarn.
But it looks
So
intentional. I thought it was a striping yarn that you just like had.
so maybe don't tell all your secrets on the internet. Here's the inside of the other one. You can see that the
Oh,
stripes are different sizes, different colors. So, dun, da, 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 the moment we've all been waiting for.
yes.
Here's the hat.
Oh, oh my
So
gosh.
you can see the ribbing goes all the way up to where the crown decreases start, and the inner cuff also goes all the way up. So you have it's really warm because you have 2 full layers, and actually how I have it folded up right now, this is one of my favorite ways to wear it, is with the outer one kind of cuffed, more of like a traditional hat look, and then the inner one is like you're wearing a slouchy beanie, and then you put another hat on top of it, which is like that's the mood. That's what I wanted. Because I feel like that's what the river mitts give me, are like I'm wearing, like, a favorite sweatshirt underneath that has a hole
Mm.
for the thumb, and then I, pulled another cuff on to stay warm. So,
Oh my gosh. Okay. So now I'll show off what
yeah, show
I've
me
had
yours.
been able to accomplish on mine. You are the fastest knitter in this room. So, and people who've seen me knit, no, I'm not like no slouch, but so this, girl,
Oh,
I'm
I love that color
almost,
combo.
isn't it great? It again, this was also like a struggle because this is stash yarn, right? And
Mhm.
I loved how yours had this surprise of like all of these stripy colors under here that you could choose to reveal or not as much as you want. And I just thought that was so great. After doing stash diving, I had this Wonderclex, which is a shuffle yarn, and then This also shuffle yarn. This is albino. This is a wool
I
and linen
love
blend.
Albino.
Yeah,
Oh, it has such a good texture.
it does. And it was the one that I mentioned has that a bit of a thick and thin feel because it's a one ply. So
Mhm.
embracing it, it's okay that, this inner one is a nylon wool versus this one being a wool and linen. They still work together, and it actually makes this albino a lot more wearable, I think, because it's a little bit on the scratchier side. It's a little more of a rough
Mhm.
texture, which gives it amazing stitch definition. But like right against your ear might be a little sensitive if that's the way you
This is
feel
a
about
great
things.
pattern to use something that you want next to your skin for the inner one and something maybe
Mm,
a little stronger on the outside.
it just came together so great.
I wanna say 2 more things about the hat quick. Number 1, I
Yes.
wanna show off my decreases so we can
Mm, I love it. I love this square. It's a like you said, it's a great shape. It stands up really nice.
Yeah, and I think the linearness of it pairs nicely with the ribbing and matches the vibe. The other thing that I wanna point out is that when adapting this, when you do the river mitts, you're knitting them this way, and then you do Katie's really brilliant split thing to make your outer flap, right? And I thought about going crown down, but part of what I wanted to do was use up my yarn. And I didn't know how much of the inner yarn I had left, so I thought, "Oh, well, I wanna do the ribbing first." So
Smart.
mine has worked from the bottom up, and then you join your 2 together instead of splitting them, and I think it's a clever adaptation, if I say so myself. There's different ways to get this double cuff, which is so integral to the River Mitts look, but
I didn't even think about that. But yes, of course, you're right. It's the opposite direction,
Mhm.
essentially. Even though they're both made from the bottom up, the way they're connected, I dare say this is way easier than doing my method. So, a note about this, Sasha and I are friends. We collaborate. We have this very open design relationship and everything. And so, for her to take this pattern and run with it in her adaptation, I love that. Like, it didn't bother me. If anything, I kept thinking, like, well, how would I have done that? And it was different. Like, I would not have designed it with such a long brim. I probably would have just done like something puny. And I think in the end that it is way better. Like it makes it with the super long brim because it offers so much versatility and it's so fun. So we are fine with those types of things. I can't say that every designer would be like, yeah, no, go and adapt my pattern into a new thing. But like it ends up being different because guess what? I don't know if you know this, Sasha, but we're different people and we
What?
think differently. Yeah. We can
This is
both
news
be
to me.
knitting designers and have different ways of thinking. There is no one way. We all inspire each other. And I think that's really part of the magic.
It's such a good point about adaptation and collaboration and ethics because as makers, like, we with great power comes great responsibility.
Sure.
We are capable of making all kinds of things. And for me and my sensibilities, if somebody loves one of my patterns and wants to adapt it into something else, especially if like I just wanted to make one, I just wanted like a cool scarf to go with that hat or whatever. Awesome, great. Use those skills, show me pictures, I'll cheer you on. It's when there's like publication and money exchange that it starts getting a little
More
we're all a
complicated.
community. We're a
Yeah,
community
yeah.
and it's good to keep community vibes positive and supportive and just respect people and their different boundaries because different people have different people are different. I
Yes.
feel like I'm repeating you now. That aside though, I want to circle back to when we were collaborating on the Count Your Blessings cowl and how our
Mm,
design brains work differently and that was so cool. That's the first time that I've ever done, like, a really collaborative design with somebody. I've done collaborative designing where, like, somebody else will kind of brain dump at me and go, "Wouldn't it be cool if there were a thing that was like this and this and this?" And I go, "Oh, yeah, I can totally write up something like that." And then I go home by myself and I
mm.
make the thing and go, "Da-da." But with Count Your Blessings, we were really going back and forth together and going, well, do you think it should be long or short or tall or bobbles all the way around or not? Or like
800 bobbles or no?
right. As I'm like knitting the sample of the first version and I'm emailing Katie and going, this sucks. I don't want to knit the rest of this.
Yes. A good sign that other people won't want to knit it either.
So it's so cool to get inside of somebody else's brain a little bit and see like, how does your thought process work? How do you start your design? Where does your process start, Katie? When you're starting a design, what do you do first?
That's a great question. Usually I have an idea, especially now that like when I first started designing, I didn't really have a lens. And I just did stuff that, like when I was working at the yarn store, someone might mention, like, kind of like you were saying, like, oh, I wish there was something like this. And I'd be like, okay, well, let's see if we can do that. But it wasn't like intentional necessarily. And so now that my patterns are more magically minded, my ideas usually come from like, what if there was a design that could help you make friends? Like, what if there
Mm.
was a design that could help you be invisible while traveling? And what would that look like from there? So, usually it's like a high level magical concept that then trickles down
I
into
love that.
so many variations of what it could be physically. Because, like you said, I could give you that what would a design be that could help you make friends? And then we could not talk to each other for a month and come back, and 100% it will be different. If it was exactly the same, that would be a hell of a thing.
That would be so freaky.
Yes.
Love the idea that you're starting from an idea of what do I want this to do for me versus like, I need a hat.
Yeah, right. Well, sometimes it does. Generally, when I do that, it's sort of like, okay, well, then what does this hat like? Why am I making this hat?
Yeah.
Just because a hat?
What is the tea loss of the hat?
That's right.
Yeah, I am not so philosophical with my design process. So lately I've been trying to do some more designs to support sales of yarn that I carry in the shop, which look out for that. I've got several things in the work coming out.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting from the yarn and I'm looking at the yarn and I'm going, what is going to show this yarn off to its best potential? What
Mm,
is going to make this yarn like the perfect choice for this thing rather than just a choice?
yes.
Yeah.
And that's what people really want, I find. It's our jobs to make the project enticing no matter what your angle is that you're going for. Having worked at a yarn store, I used to do that too. Like,
Mhm.
what will show this off to its best advantage? Because people will see it and be like, what though? What do I make out of this? And if you have a sample made out of it, that is what they will make and in that color, which is
In
why
that color. In that color. Oh, I got
which
so
is
tired when I
why you always make it in the one you have the most of and the ugliest color because it's easy to
yes.
sell pretty colors.
Yes. 100%. I was just about to say I got so tired of when I worked at a brick and mortar and I was knitting a lot of their samples. Like always the brown green. It's like
Oof.
why? Why does this color even exist? And now I'm like making a thing that I want people to
Yeah.
imagine themselves wearing it and then it would sell out because that's what people saw. They're like, I want to make that.
Yes, that. Because that is clearly successful. I think we've talked about this before. Like,
Yeah.
why can't people see it in another color? And it's because they are already in love with it in that color.
Can I tell you my favorite trick for fooling brains into getting past the picture on the pattern?
Oh, yes.
Is
Secret tips.
the old school way is to run it off in black and white and then like literally just sit people down with colored pencils and crayons and say like what color would you like to imagine it be? The newer way
Oh,
you could probably like Photoshop it.
it's more engaging when you're still doing pen and paper or whatever, physically writing something, drawing something.
Especially like things with stripes or things with like a color motif. Like sometimes they can imagine changing the background color, but then they're like, oh, but the pink wouldn't look good against the yellow that I want to make it out of. And I'm like, okay, what if the pink weren't pink though? And like,
There
so
you go.
coloring it in really like seemed to give people permission to envision it different ways.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So now that we have mitts and a hat with this
Mhm.
cool double cuff brim
Yeah.
situation, what other things could we design that would have this similar feature?
Well, I was talking about slouchy socks earlier when I was like, I wish it had a slouchy sock vibe. So, I mean, like in that way that the 80s are kind of coming back around, I could see like maybe not 100% River Mitts vibes because I think I would want like maybe brioche to like really get the dimensionality and like a really satisfying scrunchy slouch. But then you could
Yeah.
have that like leg warmer double cuff slouch sock look with just one foot in your shoe rather than having like the
Yeah,
layers.
love that.
Let's see what else could we do. Obviously, like sweater cuff. If you were knitting a sweater and you love your river mitts, you could just like pop a river mitt finish onto any long
Oh,
sleeve
yeah.
sweater.
Not only a knitting pattern, right? That maybe just has whatever cuff, you can put this in there. But like, let's say you just have, a fabric sweatshirt
Hmm.
and you make the bold decision to cut that cuff off. You can poke your knitting needle inside the fabric. It will hold up. I mean, maybe you want to do like a quick line of sewing, but even then, I think it would probably be fine. And then you can just knit it off of that. So you have like a little bit of a combo style.
Number one, I love that. And I need to go through my clothes and see if there's something that I want to try that way. Number two, it reminded me of something, a picture that I saw. I was like in undergrad, and clearly it has stuck with me because I'm about to tell you about it. Somebody made the most amazing shoes. They took like just kind of plain high heels from the thrift store and poked holes just above the sole, like in the upper all the way around, picked up stitches and then like knit a little booty cover for them. So you had like these knit booty high heels. They were so cute. Oh my
Ooh.
gosh.
Okay, well, I expect you to start these over the summer. Very cool.
Let's see, other
Uh,
places to put double cuffs. Ah, well, your turtlenecks. I think last time we talked, you talked about how when you were in fashion school, you had a turtleneck
Everything.
era.
Everything had a friggin' stand-up collar, stovepipe, something or other. Yes, I was obsessed. I would
Well,
never wear them though, which is funny, but like maybe this way, knitted, it's a little different. It's not like choking you. And if you have the two, you can kind of again do that like scrunchy, slouchy, pull it over the side.
well,
If you did it like really wide.
oh, that
Ooh,
could be cool. See, I
yeah.
was thinking like I could see like a turtleneck or even like a mock turtleneck and then like a cow neck kind of like on this one. So you have like one drapey and one.
Oh, see, again, the limit does not exist. That's fun. Yeah, I didn't think about making one like much wider because why not? Oh,
Yeah.
well, in that case, I mean, you could make it into like a funky little skirt if you're a person who likes to wear a knit skirt, where one's like,
Ooh.
the pencil tight underneath, and then the other
Mhm.
could be like even a different fiber or thickness altogether. It could be like a lacier version so that there's like flow and you can maybe see through it. You do some lace work intentionally to like work the 2 colors together. Mhm.
Mhm. Now I'm imagining, what if there were, like, a pencil skirt under, and then on the overlayer, like, yeah, maybe something lacy, but, like, on a crinoline, so it sticks out, like, tutu-y
Oh,
almost,
oh,
but then you
oh.
still have the pencil skirt coming out of the bottom. I would wear that.
Oh my gosh. I I never wanted to knit a skirt until now, and now we have many versions of the skirt that I want to knit.
Every time I talk to you, my list just gets longer.
So, you are designing a knitting pattern.
Yep.
We have all these ideas. When do you decide a pattern is done and ready to
Oh.
share?
Oh, this is so hard because my little perfectionist brain always wants to like just like one more better or like, oh, I could add this variation because in my mind like I'm always thinking about variations and what I would do differently the next time. And I want to communicate that to people. I want to go, if you don't like it exactly like this, it doesn't have to be exactly like this. You could do it this way or this way or this way. But like, that's actually not a good pattern. That's really overwhelming for people and not what they're looking for from a knitting
It
pattern most of the time.
I have also learned this, that making all options available and everything okay is not okay for people, which is fine because then I had a friend who told me, "Katie, you're just designing 8 patterns in one pattern. Make them 8 separate patterns." So really, Sasha, you're just designing a line, a cohesive line of
An
patterns.
ebook.
An ebook. Yes, a whole genre of the evolution of one idea. And how fun is that, huh?
Well, and didn't, pardon me if I'm remembering this incorrectly, but didn't you actually split one of your patterns that you published? Was it the Moon and Sun Shawl, or was it Ship to Shore, that you ended up splitting the big version and the little version into 2 standalone patterns because they were different enough that it really made more sense to present them that way?
Yes, both.
Both. I'm in the middle of a bit of a paradigm shift of how I think about my designing and my pattern writing and what is and isn't worth publishing. Because
Hmm.
for the longest time, I only published patterns that I personally would be happy to pay for. And that doesn't mean that future patterns won't be high quality. What that means is I tend not to buy a pattern if I look at the pattern picture and go, I can make something kind of like that. Sometimes I run into problems trying to follow other people's patterns because our gauge is just too different, or they don't use the increases that I like. And then when I try to put the increases that I like in, then it's not like lining up quite right. And if I had just done it from scratch myself from the start, I would have been happy and it would have been smooth sailing. So that's what I tend to do on a personal level. So if I'm going to, for myself, buy a pattern, it's usually because there's some really interesting piece of design to it that I can't immediately look and go, I know how they did that. And so that's what I was
Mhm.
publishing. And it turns out that that's not what most people want to buy, because a lot of people aren't looking to be highly technical knitters like that. They are knitting more to relax. They maybe don't have the years of experience and the design skills under their belt to look at pictures and go, I can make that. So I'm trying to see my simpler ideas as still worth publishing, even though it is not a document that maybe I would personally want. That sounds wrong. Gosh, this is coming across really weird, I think.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. Not everything you design is for you.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes you're designing things for people who want simple pimple. That was a huge, maybe like 80% of the people that I used to get when I worked at the yarn store wanted like the easy, simple, basic pattern. We are experts comparatively in the field. So they don't even think about the stuff that we're thinking like, well, it's got to be all of these things because it's $8. Like, which also, I'm sorry to tell people, is not a lot of money for the hours and hours of work that even the most of
Mm-mm.
simple of patterns takes, because you still have to write it, put it online, take pictures, all that stuff. And all takes time. So the fact that it's still like $8 or $10 is a great bargain. Um,
Absolutely.
that being said, like, there's a lot of freedom in a simple pattern, like these river mitts, ultimately there's only really like 1 or 2 spots that really makes it unique. The rest of it is a tube. So if you were a person that was like, "Oh, I can figure this out, like I don't need the pattern." Awesome. Congratulations. You're a skilled handy person, or a person who's not who's willing to, take a chance, redo it. It's fine. It's about the journey for you. If it's more like I'd want that thing, people are want to pay for it, and they'll get what they want, whether that's something simple or something complicated. Luckily, there's plenty of it out there. So, maybe you just have like an essentials line,
Mhm.
and that is offered for people who are looking for that. Nobody's forcing anyone to buy a pattern.
That's true. I just, especially as I've been working on patterns for Skein Shop and making this hat, like this hat, oh my gosh, even just last year, I would have been like, I'm not going to write the pattern out for the, why would I write the pattern for this hat? Have you made a hat before? Great. Look at this hat, make the hat.
And then the first question they would say is, but What's it made out of? How many stitches did you have done? I don't know how to do that top part. What is that even called?
The good news is that from writing really weird technical patterns, I like to think that I write an extremely clear and accessible, simple pattern.
You're not overlooking the small details, which is something I tend to do because I just assume you'll know to put all the stitches evenly on double pointed needles if you choose to use them. Like sometimes I forget people still like when you tell them how to do certain things that maybe they just never have thought of on their own and don't want to. And that's fine.
To quote my father, we're all born ignorant. So
That's
it's
right.
it's okay. You have to learn everything at some point, and it's really easy to forget and overlook that, like, I learned to join in the round and not twist things when I was 6.
Yeah. Jim was always my best reminder of I'm not paying attention to the little details or explaining the small things. He'd be like, "Well, what is it? What does a notion even mean? Like, what does the word notion mean?" And I was like, "Hmm, I never really thought about it. It's just the
And
little stuff
actually,
that you
that's a
need."
really juicy question of, like, what are notions? How big is something before it's no longer a notion? I'm sorry,
Right.
I'm ready to, like, have that whole conversation with you.
Why aren't needles notions? Are they? A crochet hook could be a notion if you're not using it to crochet,
Right?
but what
And, like, blocking wires don't fit in my notions bag. Are they a notion?
Yes, is there a size requirement? You wanna know if you're watching and listening, please reach out and let us know what you think.
Give
What
us
is a
your
notion?
personal definition for notion.
Do we wanna talk about our hex shawls or
I'd be
hex cloth?
I blocked it and everything. Katie, here's the thing. I have
Oh.
gotten so much better about, like, weaving in my ends in a timely fashion, but I still put off some finishing work sometimes.
Mm.
So I was like, "Oh gosh, I've got to block this so that I can show it to Katie tomorrow." And I ended up blocking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things yesterday
Oh,
because there might have been a little bit of a queue.
way to use that motivation.
So,
Okay. Ooh, is it brown? Is it green?
it is brown. It is like a really light brown gray. I wanted a very neutral color so
Mhm.
that the color wouldn't be a factor in any readings that I use it for. So I wanted something just kind of grounded, neutral,
Nice.
a good base.
As opposed to the one that I did initially, which is the neon yellow. My second one was in a what I thought was more neutral color, blue.
It's beautiful.
What did you think of knitting then? You said you knit it in a weekend, which
I
is
did.
pretty quick. Wow.
Yes, stress knitting is my superpower. The more stressed I am, the more I knit. What did I think of knitting this? I loved it. It was so fun because since it's from the center out, the
The
first rounds go really fast and you're like having so much fun. And then at the end, they're long, but it never gets crazy long. It's never like a slog to get around. And there's more variation towards the end. So you're like looking forward to getting to the next fun thing.
yes.
I loved it. And I love this bind off that you chose.
Isn't it
It
fun?
it's so fun and it is really effective. I've done other Pico bind offs that just make me want to like stab my eyes out. And this one,
Yes.
like, you get plenty of that good bumpy stuff. And I will admit, I did not get my blocking wires out for this. So not all Picos are alike. I just put some pins in it and then my cat pulled half of them out. So, you know, adaptation.
Roll with it.
These Picos did not make me crazy. And I think they're really lovely.
I love Pico bind offs and cast ons, but agree that it's like, I mean, it's like doing many rows in the last or first bit. So it can be a little tedious. And then the blocking is also tedious if you want it to be like really pronounced. I can't remember now where I found this bind off, but I'm sure I'll note it in the pattern. But it was listed as like a simple Pico. And I was like, tell me more. Because my first sample reminded me of the sun. So I was like, there should be like rays coming out,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm.
so, in an effort to make it a little different than the same Pico pattern that I have on many patterns, I found this one. So I'm glad to know that you found it enjoyable to knit since it's the last part. It's always nice not hating the project at the end. So,
Yeah. Well, and it also gives you a little extra give it gives so as someone who frequently binds off too tightly, I did not go up a needle size to do this bind off, and I have so much like I could have blocked
oh,
this
good
much more
point.
aggressively. So it gives you a little bit of extra elasticity in your bind off, which I really appreciate.
I didn't even think about that, but you're right. There's a lot of forgiveness in this pattern. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm glad to know you like the different like sections. I have found in the past, like my ship to shore shawl was
Mhm.
really successful and quick to knit because I mean the first one was really small, but also people just look forward to having like the next section to get to. Like, okay, this
Yes.
was fun. I'm over it. I got it. What's the next one? What's the
It's the
next one?
self-striping yarn effect of where you're like, "Just 2 more rows and I'll get the new color."
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yes. There's no room for your brain to check out. Like your consciousness is
Mm-mm.
invested, it is excited, and so you make progress. And it's nice also that it's in a worsted weight so that, it doesn't actually take too long.
And I love all of your pearl rounds. I don't know if you can because mine is oh, you can see them.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can see it
It
because
gives
the
it this
blocking.
wonderful oh, because of the blocking. Gives it this wonderful ripple effect. I love that imagery. I my brain is now like churning on ripple metaphors. Sitting here just now, I'm like draping it in my lap and it is like the perfect little like I just want to cover my my knees because I'm a little cold because it's cold outside here.
Well, I'm glad that this can offer you a little bit of warmth for not too much of a time investment. That's great. Yeah, I did notice it's not bad for like a little bit of a lap throw and
Mhm.
a nice shape where it actually will cover you a little bit. The dog has enjoyed laying on it. I actually have been using it as like a tablecloth a lot
Yeah.
but generally what I really wanted were these different sections so that if you wanted to use it as a divination cloth there were like really easy areas for you to be like,
Mm.
okay, I'm going to put three at the top, or like one on each side and one in the center, or just one in the center. I want it to be like right to the point. Or you could do like a huge tableau in this like circular pattern and use all of
Mm.
these different sections that you've knit into it. So there's lots of room to put your own spin on it.
So are you planning on developing a book of spreads to go with this?
I still am based on our previous conversation at the end of the last season. I do have like a few in mind. Like I did the 3 card spread. I introduced that in the February horoscopes for knitters.
Oh, I
So
loved
there's
that
that
one.
one.
Yes.
And then I have another that's like 7 cards that you can
Ooh.
do around.
Mhm.
So I am working on developing that. Maybe it'll just be like a trio of,
I like
card
that.
spreads don't have to make it super complicated, right?
The other thing that I was thinking about just now, looking at it and going, "Oh, this would be perfect," when you were talking about, oh, like, putting things in different sections, if you're into throwing bones or casting charms in any kind of way, this would be such a great cloth for that.
Definitely. Yes. I have a bunch of runes that sometimes I'll throw, and
Mhm.
I hate like hearing them clank against stuff. So it's like perfect to be like, okay, which ones made it to the outer edge? Which ones are in the inner edge? Are they up or are they down? Lots of ways that you could interpret it. So even if you just interpret it as a little blanket and you never use it for divining, that's also fine. So in the second half, I have a few questions which I am asking all of my guests this season. Question number one: do you find that adapting to things comes naturally to you, or is this something that you've had to develop more over the years?
It comes really naturally to me, and I attribute a lot of that, honestly, to being left-handed and being, like, strongly, unrepentantly everything is so left-handed. For forever, any instructions that go, "Hold this in your right hand, do it with your left hand," I'm flipping them for myself.
Oh,
With knitting, if I blindly follow a pattern, charts turn out backwards. So I have to think about, do I mind if the chart is backwards or does it have writing or like a picture of a globe that's going to look weird if it's backwards? Or
yeah.
the first sweater I made, I blindly followed instructions, and my buttonholes were not on the side that I expected them to be because
Ah,
left-handed problems.
yes.
So I've been doing a ton of adaptation like that, and I think it just has gotten into my brain of going, if this doesn't work, it's not a problem with you. Like, just do it differently and it'll be fine. I will say that at this point in my life, the words left and right have virtually no meaning because I spent so many years as a dance teacher. And so sometimes you have your back to the students so that they can like really follow exactly what you're doing. And so then if you're saying do something with your left foot, you're doing it with your left foot. And sometimes you're facing them so that you can better see what they're doing, or, you know, like it's just warm ups. And so they don't like need the extra assist of having your back to them. And so then you're going, okay, everybody to the left, and you're going to the right because you're facing them. So,
Interesting.
yeah,
Do
like
you feel
very,
that makes you more present in the moment?
it makes me feel differently in space where I am much more likely to associate the idea of left
Mm.
with a particular wall in a room because that's again like with the dance teacher thing, that's what I would do is I would say, okay, well if the wall with the door is always left for the kids, like that's the direction that they are always facing, then if I'm going towards the door, my mouth says left regardless of what my body is doing.
It's like that when you read a word, that's a different color, but you're reading like red, but it's green. It's
Yes.
very that. Like you have a
Yes.
lot of brain flexibility.
I have
Oh, that's
fully
so cool.
decoupled the meanings of left and right from those words.
Next question here. Are there specific tools or rituals or techniques that help you stay flexible when challenges arise? Not just in
Yes,
knitting, but life.
like in life, yeah. Absolutely. So I think magically speaking, tarot is my biggest tool for this. When there are challenges, I will often pull a few cards and just like use it as a check-in of like, are there options that I'm not seeing? Using it to kind of break whatever thought hamster is going, because sometimes you get really, really stuck on like one idea or envisioning a problem one certain way, and then you pull your cards out and they're like, what about this other thing? There's an animated gif of a line that like turns into a triangle, turns into a square, turns into a pentagon, and you breathe in as it's expanding and then you breathe out as it's contracting, and it is just the most like centering wonderful thing when I'm feeling challenged, when I'm like I need to calm down so that I can approach this from like a more rational place rather than a reactive place. I will pull that GIF up on my phone and just breathe with it. And I have found like my body really knows how much of that I need, because it's not like, oh, I'm going to do it 3 times. I'm going to do it 5 times. It's like, no, I do it until I start getting bored. And when I'm bored with it, that usually I'm a little bit more regulated.
Oh, such a great reflection and way to know yourself. I'll definitely take you up on that and we'll share it in the description for folks who also maybe want to try that. So,
Awesome.
breath work for the win.
Yes.
Oh, is there a time when an unexpected challenge in a project led to a better outcome than you initially planned?
Yes. And I'm so glad that you sent me these questions in advance because I brought it with me.
Yay!
So once upon a time, I was like, I want to weave some pillow covers on my rigid huddle loom. And I want to stash bust. I'm going to use up all of my worsted weight scraps, making these like scrappy, funky pillow covers. So I warped it and I started weaving and it was going great. And then all of a sudden I ran out of worsted weight scraps because this weaving just eats yarn. And I am so happy that I did run out because I love all the texture that the different sizes brought me. So, in an admission that will perhaps not be surprising to anyone, I never turned these pieces of cloth into the pillow covers, but you can see here's some that's worsted weight and that's fine, and then here's some that's like a chunky thick and thin.
Oh,
And let's see, this was some thicker stuff. Let me see, there's a red section that's really pretty that I want to show you. But I when I when I ran out of yarn, I was mad. I was like, I thought I had enough scraps. Yeah, here we go. There's a good red section and then a chunky teal. And I was like, and now my project will be ruined and my grid won't be even. My weaving texture, not everything is going to be perfectly evenly spaced. And so unlike knitting where if it goes wrong, you just rip it out and you still have good yarn, weaving, when you warp it, you end up cutting it. And so like all of the yarn in the warp was now in like, you know,
Oh,
pieces that were a
lengths.
few yards long. Right. So like it wasn't
Right.
going to be good for anything else. I was so happy with how that turned out. And the differences in size and texture, I think, make it versus like it would have been so boring the way that I planned it.
It still would have been beautiful and wonderful and exactly what you intended, but it ended up being even more of a learning tool. Like, oh, it turns out it doesn't have to be all the same thickness. And it takes a lot more leftover yarn than you initially thought you had, which, hey, that's pretty cool. Even just having it as like a tablecloth or just a length
Yeah.
of fabric that is really pretty that you could use as a tapestry or something.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Doesn't have to be cut up and made into pillows. It could just be like a really great sari or something, wear it around like a
Yeah.
shrug. Yeah, so fun. Well, good. I'm glad that you had this with you. Such an excellent example of being flexible. In what ways do you think adapting and intuition work together in magical making?
Oh, this is a great question. This is a really good one. I think that making is such a great conduit for magical work because you get to make all the decisions from the start. You're not going, I want a blue tablecloth for this ritual or whatever. And then you go to the store and they don't have the blue that you're
Mm.
thinking of, or they have it, but like it's a round tablecloth and your table is rectangular, or, and then you're adapting from there. And that's great. That's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're making, you go, I want a blue tablecloth that is this color blue and has this lace pattern, and I'm going to make it like this. So you are getting to get exactly what you want and need now rather than having to try to like work around and fix it after the fact, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the difference between going, I want to wear a vest. So you knit a vest and it's an awesome vest, or going, I want to wear a vest, and you go to the thrift store and you see an awesome sweater. So you buy it and you cut the sleeves off, then you got to figure out how to like put a little finish on there, and like you end up with a great vest either way. But I would rather like make a vest that was a vest in the first place for
Yeah.
me.
To wrap things up, what advice would you give someone who's struggling with change or feeling stuck in their creative practice?
We have all been there. Oh my gosh. And I think it's really important not to get down on yourself or start like blaming, like, if you're in a slump, you're in a slump, and that's okay. It's okay to go through periods of high productivity and low productivity and high interest and low interest. And like maybe you're not super into knitting this year. Maybe you're super into reading, or maybe the garden has caught your attention. That's fine. Be gentle with yourself. But if what is going on is that like that you love knitting and you really want to be knitting and you are just not feeling it, my best advice is to seek out community, whether that's in person or online or however. I know I do better work, I do more work, and I'm more enthusiastic about my work when I am in community. And that doesn't mean just looking, it doesn't mean scrolling, hashtags and looking at everybody else's beautiful
Yeah.
projects. It means interacting with people, going, I love that. How did you do it? Or I'm running into this problem. Can anybody help me solve it? Or look at this great thing I just made. It's entering the conversation because there are so many brilliant people out there and it's not possible for any one person to know everything. And when you're engaging with the thinking, even if you're not making anything, even if you start out and like just all you're doing is going, that's beautiful, I love the color, or where did you find that yarn? Number one, you're making that person feel awesome that somebody is interested in their work, which is in and of itself a good thing. But you're also like you're thinking about it again. Then you're going, oh, I love working with blue yarn. Or I love looking at
Mm-mm.
projects that are in blue yarn. Maybe I want to make something that's blue. Or, wow, mittens have really been catching my eye lately. Maybe I should look for a mitten pattern and see if that like feels like fun, even if that's not something that you usually make, or even if that's something that you've made a dozen of and you're like, I don't need more mittens.
Someone does.
Someone does. And, I was having this conversation with a friend the other day that I was like, everything that I want to make right now is an object that I don't need, or even some of them that I don't know that I would want to keep or wear. And she said, you're allowed to make things just for the joy of it, right? Like you are allowed to just make what you want to make and have that be the goal.
There are people who have a million shawls. You can't wear them all at once. I mean, you could, but generally, most people don't, and that's okay. Like you said, some people never wear them, but they make great gifts. You're always going to have something like to wear with something, lots of options, even if you're not wearing them all the
Mhm.
time. And maybe what really struck you about that thing was a certain skill in it. So, like,
Mhm.
the what you're making is sort of just a bonus. I miss the knitting community. For a long time, I was like, I as a person who worked at a store, it was not a zen experience for me to hang out at a yarn store because I couldn't
Yep.
stop myself from like being asked to help people
Yep.
or feeling like I have to help these people because I
Yep.
know the answer. And
Well,
I didn't
and
realize like they don't need to know the answer from me necessarily.
I used to really enjoy going to trade shows, not just to find cool new things for the store or to like exhibit and try to get new customers or whatever, but because of the ability to just be around other creative brains, to just bounce ideas around with cool people who are interested in the same things that I am, I would always come back from those like feeling number one, smart and cool and amazing and ready to work, like ready to like really get creative and make something happen. And, not to be too much of a downer, but like I'm still being really cautious with my health around various things. And so I haven't been to a trade show in 5 years. And I know that my business has suffered because of it, because I don't get that punch of like, yes, this is why I'm doing this. And these are cool ideas. It's
Yep.
it's hard to every day sit down and be like, all right, do the thing.
I know exactly what you're talking about. This is where we met, was at a trade show.
Yep.
And it doesn't also help that there are far less of them now.
Yes.
They're more expensive than ever.
And the topics are broader. So if I were to go to like the trade show that has mostly taken over from the one where Katie and I met at is not just for fiber arts. It's for all creativity, which is great because like there are people who love scrapbooking and knitting, and now you can go shop scrapbooking stuff and knitting stuff all in one place. But it changes the vibe.
Yes. It dilutes it a little bit. There's really not to say no reason for me to go to like a wholesale trade show anymore, but I'm not selling. And so it's 100% a financial output and like maybe an emotional return, but like it's not always financially smart.
That's where I'm at, is that the business that I would be exhibiting as my wholesaling business focuses on fiber for hand spinners, which in the fiber arts world was already like a small niche of the fiber arts
Right.
world. And so now if the fiber arts world is a small niche of this larger crafting ecosystem, to be there representing like a niche of a niche, there's not going to be enough customers, because the shops that carry rubber stamps are not likely to also want to carry fiber for hand spinners. They might pick up a little bit of yarn for like people who want to like add it to cards or something. Like that could be
Sure.
kind of cool. There could be some synergy there, but I'm having a hard time imagining enough uses for fiber in all different kinds of making to make it worth the expense of exhibiting, because oh my gosh, our trade show's expensive.
In so many ways. Even if you can just drive there with your stuff, like everything's expensive. The food's expensive, the lodging's expensive, getting the booth. Like there's so many aspects that folks don't know about. So maybe in the future, hopefully in the future, there will be new options. Things are always changing. I mean, Joann's is going out of business. So like there could be opportunity for more local small stores to populate that marketplace, but then
Mhm.
that leads to its own challenges because there's different price points that people are expected and selections that, are not necessarily realistic for someone who's small. And so I think this year and next year will be a very revolutionary evolution of
Yes.
fiber arts, knitting, crafting. Um,
Yes.
in a lot of ways, and I think we'll see that in shops and all sorts of things. So we'll see.
The industry is changing. We're all adapting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Sasha, thank you as always for spending time with us here. You're one of my favorite people to talk to about magical making and just, talk about the exchange of energy and creativity. We could spend just an hour talking and have 700 ideas at the end, which are some of my favorite ways to converse because then I at least will feel energized like a low key version of what those trade shows used to offer. So,
Absolutely.
and hopefully our listeners really enjoyed it. And if you want to follow Sasha at Skein Shop and learn more about where you can purchase yarn, especially if you don't have a local yarn store to support, this could be your local yarn store online. So why don't you go ahead and remind folks where they can find out more about Skein Shop?
Absolutely. So the best place to find information is just the website. It's skeinshop.com. If you want to communicate with me via email, that's info@skeinshop.com. I love consulting with people. If you go, I want to make this pattern, what yarn do you think? Or I was looking at this color and I want a green to go with it, but I'm not sure which one. I'll take a bunch of pictures and send you options. I love doing things like that. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I
Mhm.
think I am going to leave this Skein Shop Instagram, but not really do anything with it. By the time this episode comes out, I will have a Blue Sky account for the shop. And so I will make sure that Katie has that information to link in the description. We would love to chat with you on Blue Sky if that's a place that you're hanging out.
You can join us again on Patreon if you are a New Spell Patreon subscriber. It's just $5 a month, and you will get access to all of the after shows that we are continuing to do this season. The after shows come out on Fridays so that you can have more magical making goodness throughout the week. I also have a weekly coloring page that comes out on Monday related to the episode. So there's so much to do. $5 a month, even if you only do it for 1 month. It's a great way to support the show. Well, Sasha, thank you again for joining us, and we will see you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you, Katie. This is always so much fun.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, consider sharing it with a friend, leaving a review on iTunes or Spotify, and supporting us on Patreon to enjoy exclusive content. You can also subscribe to the Light from Lantern YouTube channel to receive a notification whenever a new episode of Knit a Spell is released. And as always, I'd love to hear your feedback on this episode, so be sure to leave a comment on YouTube or on Patreon. See you next week!